Check us out at buildingfortunesradio.com. Along with our marketing partners, we're here to help our PM Marketing Network Lead customers build their businesses and make the world a better place. At Building Fortunes, we know how much your business means to you and the people important to you. So spread the word, tell a friend, join our newsletter, and go make a difference in your world. Now on to our show with your host, Peter Mingles.
Hello, everyone. Peter Mingles here. You're listening to us on Building Fortunes Radio. It's www.buildingfortunesradio.com. For those people unfamiliar with my voice, my name is Peter Mingles. We own this whole thing, and we are doing a special radio show with a good friend of ours. His name is Scott Johnson. Scott and I usually do a radio show on Saturday night at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, but today is a special radio show. We're waiting on an invited guest to come in, and we scheduled this one for 9 p.m. Eastern Time after rescheduling it as per his request at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time to be able to talk to a gentleman who's going to represent a gentleman named Marco Mukaber. Mukaber, you might as well spell it the right way. Go look up online, Moukhaber, Mukhaber. That's the way we say it. He says it differently. He says it wrong. It's Marco Mukaber. And Marco is a gentleman who also has a stage name, if you will, on YouTube, Always Marco. Always Marco. You can check out his channel. He needs the extra subscriptions. But if you go and you take a look at alwaysmarco.lol, you'll see what some other people have said about Always Marco. So alwaysmarco.lol, because he's a joke. Well, Scott Johnson, this is his radio show, and we are waiting for a guest who is supposed to be taking Marco's stance on his Anti-MLM conference, which they call the MLM conference, that was done back on the Ides of March, which happened to also be, I think it's somewhere around the Ides of March of 2023, done by a gentleman named Professor Bill Keep over at the College of New Jersey, who's a pseudo, if you will, marketing professor, alleged, let's call it, MLM guru expert kind of a guy. And Marco did a presentation there that we were going to chat about with this guest who is still not here yet, Scott. So we'll talk about that in just a second. But thanks for being here on the special edition of the Scott Johnson Radio Show.
Hey, Peter. Yeah, this is a special show, and we're looking forward to talking about Marco. Hopefully our guest will be here. If not, we can talk about Marco. It's no problem. You know, one thing I was thinking about on the last show that we didn't get to because we just ran out of time is I wanted to talk a little bit about Bill Keep. You mentioned Bill Keep, professor in New Jersey, a business professor, and like you said, alleged MLM expert. And I was just thinking about, you know, this is on Marco's YouTube too. You can see one of his thumbnails on one of his videos.
And just so you know, let's interrupt your conversation because Marco's guest speaker is here.
Oh,
so
great.
let's go get him. Oh, yes. He dropped off. So we're
okay.
He had the same problem last time. So he tried to get on, try to get off. So let's why don't we queue up this one before we worry about talking about Bill Keep. So queue this up while he is trying to figure out how to get online. Scott?
Hello?
Scott?
I'm here?
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, so you're here. So why don't we do an introduction for Marco's spokesperson? And he's still trying to get online, but at least he's showing. So why don't you do
right.
that? And this way at least we'll be on topic and we won't have all that dead air.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, and he's calling in from Australia, so we have to have really good connections here all the way from here to down under, so I can understand why he might be having some difficulty. So Glenn is our guest, and we've had Glenn on maybe half a dozen times, including a week ago. We had Glenn on just talking about Marco and, you know, all of his challenges, let's call them. And Glenn actually, at least he says he likes both us and Marco for different reasons. And he would really like us together, which I just don't see happening. I just typically don't, you know, associate with cocaine dealers and shysters, you know, those kinds of people. I just don't even want to, you know, talk to them directly. I'll be happy to talk to him indirectly and to all his goons. In fact, I invited a couple of his goons on this show recently, since the last show. I invited a couple of people who made comments. One of them said he would email me soon, he said, but he hasn't done that yet. Another guy made some kind of a comment on my YouTube, and I asked him to come in, and I think he chickened out. Like most of them do chicken out, so that's just the way it goes. And so
let's see if we have Glenn. Glenn, you here? Glenn, you got to speak up. We don't hear you, Glenn. Microphone turned on. Hold on 1 second, Scott. Sorry for that. I'm going to turn his microphone on again.
Yep.
He was having problems with his laptop, I think, the last time. Glenn, are you here? Glenn, your microphone is on. If you can hear us, we cannot hear you. So, Glenn.
Yeah, I'm hearing you, Peter. I don't hear Glenn.
Yeah.
It's saying I'm logged in, but I can't hear you, he said. That's interesting. I just got a text from Glenn.
Well, we're here. So tell him to hang up and go try again.
Yeah.
We'll give him another second. So go ahead, finish your intro, Scott.
Yeah, so, we had a good conversation with Glenn. He likes certain things that we say. He likes certain things that Marco says. I'm not sure what he likes about Marco exactly. And that's really the purpose of this particular show, is to review various things about Marco and have Glenn kind of assume the position of Marco. If he can, stoop himself that low, that's going to be a challenge for Glenn, I think.
Hey, can you guys hear me?
Yep, we can hear you now. Perfect.
Awesome. How are we doing, guys?
Good. How are you?
Good. So I just had a few problems logging in, but I'm in now, so it's all good.
Yeah, that's all that matters. Glenn, we were just introducing you here on the show, giving people some background about the previous shows we've had with you, and particularly last week's show. And we wanted to sort of continue that conversation and kind of put you in the position of, from Marco's, and you're free to talk about, well, this is what Marco would think about this, or if you want to, you can say, this is what I think about this. Whatever you want to do along those lines is fine. So we just wanted to have kind of a conversation. And Peter, did you want to ask some questions up front, or do you want to just dig into these comments that I made about Marco at the MLM conference recently?
Yeah, I was thinking maybe.
Go ahead, Glenn.
Yeah, I was thinking maybe I could go through. I'll start with. I've got about 6 points of different things that Marco said in his speech. If I can just start with the first point, I'll give.
Sure, but not yet. Not yet. Let's. We have new people listening in, and they might not know anything. They don't know who Glenn is. They don't know who Peter is. They don't know who Scott is. So let's do just a few minutes of a background, if you will, of who we are. So, and I'm not worried about who you are, Glenn, for this example. We're talking about Marco because we're introducing this concept with rebutting, if you will, Marco's speech. So if you know Marco's answer, then you could, answer the question as if you were Marco. If you don't know, we might know, and because we've listened to enough of Marco's stuff and he said enough of things, that we'd be able to figure this stuff out. So
yeah, well, I mean, I agree with probably 98% of what Marco says. So.
Oh, good. So there you go. Then you know his answers. So let's go. This will be somewhat entertaining, I'm sure. So, Scott, Your background, real quick, if you will. You don't have to go specific, but in reference to this Amway conversation and MLM, give us a little bit of the background for those people that aren't familiar with you.
Yes, my wife and I were in Amway years ago, from 1993 until about 2005 or 2009, depending on how you want to count it. 2005 is when I found out about the Amway tool scam, and I went inactive as far as my upline is concerned, and I decided I would try to implement a clean Amway business. And at every turn, Amway Corporation just got in my way. They put roadblocks in front of me, barriers, and finally I just said, hey, I'm not a quitter, so I'm going to start acting up. And when I did, they, fortunately did terminate my distributorship, my IBO-ship, I guess we could say, in 2009. But during that time period from 2005 to 2009, I was both trying to figure out how to run a clean Amway business, and I was kind of like semi-undercover, right? Because I was inside, but I wasn't drinking the Kool-Aid, so to speak. And so I noticed a lot of different things during that time, knowing that I found out about the tool scam, where things that were said had a very different meaning. Once you realize sort of backstory, and when you hear something, you realize before I knew about the tool scam, and now I'm thinking something very different now that I know about it. So that's kind of my background. I do consider myself an expert in Amway, having several years of experience and, participating in the system, as they call it, the tool scam. So I've done a lot of research ever since 2005. I've talked to a lot of different people in Amway and other MLMs just to get their perspective. And we've had, dozens of them, I think, Peter, on this show over the years, whether it be Amway or other MLMs, to give their perspective of their experience. And it's really interesting how similar they are, particularly the more recent ones, because the more recent ones sort of answer the question of, well, you were in a long time ago, so maybe it's changed. Well, no, because we have people that were in recently, and it's pretty much the same song and dance. So anyway, that's a little bit about me. I'll let you introduce yourself if you'd like to, Peter.
Okay. And then in reference to you, Scott, you didn't do Amway full-time, meaning that wasn't your full-time job. You had some other source of income as well?
Absolutely. In fact, my upline, and I think most uplines in Amway, preach to keep your job. They don't want you to quit your job because they know that if you're buying the tools and the overpriced products, you need a job. You need something that's going to fund those things in Amway. And the guidance we were given was you got to have at least twice as much income from Amway compared to your job before you quit your job. I think that gives you some leeway to, fall back a little bit and then not be in the total, hurt locker that you would be if let's say you quit your job when you equaled your job income. That would be disastrous then if you fell backwards because you'd be in a real tough spot. So, I had a job, and that's really the recommendation. That's the advice that I think most Amway upline give to their downline because, again, they want to fuel that tool scam, those overpriced tools. And there's no better place to do that than from your job. So, yes, I was part-time.
So you were college educated. I'm fast forwarding through your future so we can get to some of the stuff that Glenn wants to cover. But fast forward, you were college educated, then you joined the military, then you worked for a company, consistently working for a company, raised 2 kids, and did Amway part-time. Even though you didn't build a profitable Amway business, you still managed to be able to survive growing up your kids. And if they ate rice and beans, it was because they wanted to eat rice and beans, not because they had to. So I think that kind of summarizes.
I think that does summarize it very well. And, Marco always accuses me of abandoning my kids, as he calls it. Well, I can be sure of this, that there's a lot of corporate executives out there that spent a whole lot less time with their kids than I did. So even though I spent less than I would have liked, it's not like I didn't spend any time and I totally abandoned them and they ate beans and rice and all that kind of the garbage that Marco brings up, because it is garbage. And by the way, I'm the only one that he criticizes about that. If he has anyone else on his show that was scammed by an MLM, he has a lot of sympathy and empathy for them. And, he doesn't poke fun of anybody else except for me. Now, I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm just saying the guy's a hypocrite. That's the bottom line. So, yeah. So go ahead.
So I'll fast forward. So, again, we're doing this for reference. Brand new people listening in. Scott Johnson is the gentleman who runs Building Fortunes Radio, the Scott Johnson radio show. I own Building Fortunes Radio. I host this, but I have a little bit of a background as well. Now, I know I'm going to be upstaged by Marco, but here we go. So graduated, double major, 4-year degree, French minor, biology and chemistry was my major. Decided not to become a doctor because I looked at some of my options and I just said, I'm really not sure if I want to do that. Plus, I was dating a gal that I thought that if I went away to college, I might not actually marry. Still married to that same gal, by the way. And as a result of that, decided that, I don't know, better start looking for something. Joined a management training program with a company called Electrolux. Probably most people would call that a scam because no one ever makes it. And I did. Area vice president, 97 or 96 different offices through the Midwest, and promoted myself through the ranks, made over $100,000 a year in that position multiple times in my early 20s, by the way, Marco. So having said that, I know you're going to upstage me, Marco, when we talk about your income in just a second or two, but then decided that we were going to move after a brief stint with a company called P.F. Collier, decided that, I really want to control my own destiny. That MLM thing looked pretty good. Started as an MLM distributor with a company called Nutrition for Life specifically. Grew through the ranks as a platinum. I think I was a 2-star platinum before I decided that, these guys have lost their rudder. We joined and actually was a partner with an MLM company. So I've owned an MLM company. I didn't know, Marco, you're going to be able to upstage me with that because of your vast MLM experience. But I owned an MLM company, simultaneously ran a lead generation company, been a company owner since, I think, 1998, officially on the books since 2022 when we did an LLC. But 2002. So it's been a long time, somewhat over 20 years as a small business owner. So as a small business owner in the lead generation business, working as a company owner, dealing with attorneys, I also decided I was going to join the trade association and became executive education person for the Distributor Rights Association, then eventually became president of that, and then joined the MLMAA. We did join the MLMAA. I'm a board member of that, advisory board member of the DSWA, the Direct Selling Women Alliance, and then became the president of the ANMP, the Association of Network Marketing Professionals, until I ceremoniously left that business, was terminated through the ANMP. Interesting conversation. You got to hear that one. But I left because they lost their focus and, in essence, became the president of that trade association as well before I left. Then got frustrated, decided to build Building Fortress Radio, still run my own company, still deal with a boatload of people in the MLM industry, and that's a little bit about my background. Been a criminal witness for people, been spoken to people from the FTC zillions of times relative to other things, defended people in MLM before as well. So there's a little bit about my background. So we left the best for last.
Peter, you mentioned lead generation, and I want to comment on that because Marco and his goons think that if you're in the lead generation business, you're running a scam, and that is not true. There's a lot of non-MLM businesses that also hire lead generation companies to find leads for them, whether it be insurance or investments. There's all kinds of non-MLM businesses that use leads. And the reason that Amway's tool business is a scam is that the upline pretend that they made their success from Amway, not from the tool scam. And that's what makes it a scam, is the fact that nobody is told, whether it be the downline or the prospects, that, oh, by the way, we make most of our profit from the tools, not from Amway. They're never told that. And that's what makes it a scam. It's not the making of the money. It's the fact that they lie about where their money comes from.
Let's not worry about Amway on this call. So let's worry about the Marco thing. But I'm glad you brought up what you just did because it exemplifies. So I want to speak slowly here so people can understand. It exemplifies Marco not understanding many things about business. So when he thinks lead generation is a scam, it's because he doesn't understand many things about business, which we might as well use that as a segue into Glenn. So Glenn, I need you to kind of give us Marco's background in a similar situation, because you know everything about him, because like you said, 98% about Marco. So give us his background.
I agree with 98% of what he says.
Oh, okay. We'll help fill in the gaps. So Marco's education level?
I must say, what I know about Marco is that he was a man who was hurt by an MLM because the MLM cost him his best friend. He has then dedicated himself to... That's
a description of his story. Let's talk about his credentials. Yeah. Marco's education background will help you fill out less than a year of college. So less than 1 year. Don't even know if he finished his first year of college. Okay. How many MLMs have Marco ever been a distributor from?
Marco was smart enough to reject the MLM when it was offered to him. So I would say that makes him probably smarter than someone who's...
Okay, so we call that zero, because So you would call me stupid because I was an MLM company owner.
I'm not saying that, but I'm saying Marco saw through.
No, what did you just say? What did you just say? I was not only a distributor, I was a company owner. So that means I must be multiple times stupider than Marco. Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think to be the owner of an MLM would actually make you very smart. These guys tend to be very, very. The owners of the MLM companies are very, very intelligent.
How about when I was a successful distributor? Was I stupid then?
Were you a successful distributor?
We're trying to clarify your wiggle. We're trying to clarify your wiggle room for answering a direct question about Marco. You're trying to defend that he had never had any. Marco has no MLM experience. Yes or no? As a distributor, has he ever bought a sales kit?
Correct.
Okay, that's all we need. We don't need the story. We'll get to the story later. Okay, so then if he was never a distributor, he could never have been a company owner. Okay, so what trade associations was Marco associated with?
Trade associations was he associated with?
Yeah.
I would have thought at the Anti-MLM conference that, that's not a, you said probably zero.
He invited himself to be a speaker at the MLM conference. He was not invited. He invited himself. He admits that as well. So far, Marco's experience...
They obviously wanted him to be there. If they didn't want him there, he wouldn't have been there. Lots of people who would...
Right, he invited himself. So he invites himself to an MLM conference. You're right. He got there. He got a chance to speak. We'll talk about that in a second.
You guys wanted
to
be there.
Hold on one second. No, we're stating facts. We're stating facts first, then we're going to go through your arguments. Yeah. So Marco has no MLM experience, never associated with any trade association, invited himself to his own anti-MLM conference. To his credit, he's actually been able to speak in the anti-MLM conference, and that's why we're here today. So that gives people a little bit about the background of experience level and business knowledge. Oh, how many companies has Marco owned? Traditional or not traditional companies?
Traditional or not traditional? My understanding is he's a YouTuber and a very successful YouTuber at that.
Well, we discussed that before about successful YouTubers. You must have missed our last conference. He averages about 300 likes. I guess maybe it depends on your definition. Averaging 300 likes, I'm not sure if that's a successful YouTuber if he does that full time. I know lots of other people get this in it.
He's got 60,000 YouTube subscribers. Sorry, let me speak. He's got 60,000 YouTube subscribers. There's a lot of very intelligent people with YouTube channels who have far less than 60,000 subscribers. So
okay, good. I'm glad you admitted that. I'm glad you admitted that. So people with less subscribers could be also considered successful. Thank you. Okay, so back to Marco. How many traditional businesses has Marco owned?
My understanding is that Marco... I don't think any, but he's a successful YouTuber, which is why I'm a fan of his.
So he's never been a business owner. How many people do you think he has on his payroll? How many people do you think he's ever been responsible for?
Probably zero.
Probably none. Okay, so he's never had to worry about payroll. This is some of the documentation, if you will, the facts about Marco and his credibility about understanding a business. That's when he says stuff about lead generation. But I'm going to stop there because we just wanted to lay out the credibility. But for those people listening in,
let me make one point though about that.
Sure.
You don't need a business degree. You don't need to be a genius to see that if a business has a 99-point-something% failure rate, there's a massive, massive problem, and it's a fraud and it's a con. So whether Marco has been to Harvard and he spent 8 years at university or college, or spent no time there at all, I mean, I spent 12-year-old.
At what level? I have a question for you. At what level, from 99.7, does it become a successful story? Is it 98.7? Is it 96.7?
I would say anything that's got less than anything that's got less than 50%, I would consider a failure. If I was looking to buy a franchise and the failure rate was more than 50%, I wouldn't touch it. You know. You don't need to go to you don't need to be highly educated to know that if a business is failing more than half the time, that's a very, very risky investment. More than 50%, that's risky, and business people don't touch investments with a more than 50% risk rate unless there's a massive, massive return. You know, but keep in mind that
MLM is a very, very low bar. It doesn't take hardly any money to join an MLM, so it's very easy to enter. You know, almost anybody can enter an MLM.
Well, anyone can buy.
Hold on, I don't want to get into the weeds yet. I was just asking because he had mentioned the 99.7. I wanted a kind of a benchmark for there. So let's go through. We went through credentials. Marco has none, or very few. He's a YouTuber. He gets a chance to talk on YouTube and beg for money. So I know Glenn, I know he's listening. So we're just kind of poking at him a little bit. So don't worry about defending us when we poke at him. Let's poke at his real arguments. So you have 6 points that you want to bring up. So I'll let you do most of the
talk. It's all about the speech. This is about the speech, yeah? We're not talking about Marco in general or his background or his history or the MLM model. Okay.
That's good.
All right.
Even
this is the
stupid
speech.
People say smart things every once in a while.
Okay.
So go ahead.
All right. So his first point was about the fact that he lost a friend because of the fact that he pointed out some of the things that were wrong with the MLM business model. And his friend was of the view that, his friend had been told. He said, I knew you were going to do this. I knew you were going to say that. Now, I think it's very interesting where that comes from. There was, Dexter Yeager wrote a book, and it was called Don't Let Anyone Steal Your Dream. Now, the person that told Marco's friends, I'm warning you now, there's a lot of negative dream stealers out there who are going to try and steal your dream. That wasn't his idea. He is copying the same tactics that Dexter Yeager was using 40 and 50 years ago. You know that everyone who you tell about, I'm in this MLM business, they're going to talk it down. They're going to say 99% of people fail. Therefore, what you do is you demonize the people who criticize the business. And you say, stay away from those people. Those people are bad news. They're going to drag you down. They're jealous of you. They're dream stealers. They're trying to steal your dream. So I can relate to that because the things that Marco's friend said to him are things that my father has said to me. Me and my dad had a massive falling out because his upline was telling him, Glenn is trying to steal your dream. He's dragging you down. The reason you're not a diamond is because of his negativity. So I can absolutely relate to what Marco said because I've dealt with it firsthand. Marco dealt with it for a short period of time. I've dealt with this for over 2 decades.
Can I interrupt? Can I interrupt?
Yep.
Only because when you mentioned you wanted to talk about Marco's stuff, you thought it was a brilliant presentation.
It was brilliant.
In this regard, your example with his friend, I am in agreement with anybody, whether it's you, Marco, or anybody else, that when they get into that lost relationship kind of conversation, where you told me you were going to steal their dreams and stuff like that, that's a challenge in MLM, direct sales. Anytime anybody's trying to do something, you run across that. So that's a common thing. If we needed a check mark of agreement, at least for me, I can't speak for Scott, I'm in agreement. So that point would be.
We agree. Yeah, I guess if I could put my 2 cents in, it's what's called confirmation bias. So the upline is very smart in an evil way because they do tell their downline. Now you're going to find people that are against this and they won't join and they'll criticize you. And when that happens, those are losers, those are quitters, those are people that just don't see it. They'll say all those kinds of things. And then when it actually happens to you, then you actually have more belief in your upline because what they told you would come true came true. And so it is a very evil genius type thing. And I agree with Peter. It's a problem, and it's just something that, the upline does to convince the person that they're doing the right thing, even though their upline is lying through their teeth. But I agree with Peter and Glenn on that it's a bad thing. Yeah.
But I have to share with you this. So this is a personal story, and I'm going to stop talking about personal stories, but it's a personal story specific about this. On my job interview with Electrolux, the management training career, the branch manager, his name is Joe, asked me somewhere during the interview, mostly towards the end of the interview, he says, this is specifically what he said, who are you going to talk to about this opportunity when you go home? And I felt that was a really awkward question for me. I'm like, and I didn't know this guy before this interview, but during the interview, he had built some confidence in me. And I said, I don't know, Joe, that's kind of a weird question, but I'm going to talk to my mom and my dad, definitely, my girlfriend for sure, probably some of my friends. And then he said to me, what would you do if they told you not to do this? And I said, Joe, this is kind of weird. It's getting a little bit awkward here in this interview. Why would they tell me not to do this? And because, what is it about this that's something I shouldn't be doing? And he says, well, I don't know, Peter. I mean, you've been sitting here in this interview, hearing this whole presentation. Now, way back then, you could show paychecks, and it was in his office, and there wasn't the same. There probably still was the same regulations, but nobody was listening. So he told me about, the opportunity and blah blah blah, all that sort of stuff. Laid it out. He says, there's nothing. Everything I've told you is exactly the way it works. You work your way up in sales. You blah blah blah. You do this, all this sort of stuff. And he says, but they're not here on the interview, and I just wanted to know what will happen if you go home and they tell you not to do this. And I said, well, they're not here on the interview, Joe. Like, I might not have the answers that they need, but I mean, I trust you, and not for nothing, Joe, but not only do I trust you, but I'm not stupid. If I find out that they're right and you lied, I'm out of here. What's your incentive to do this? I mean, I'm not stupid. I mean, you got to remember, I'm 22 years old at the time, physically fit. I probably could have kicked his ass. So the reality was, I'm not, I'm a New York guy, and he's a New York guy too. So we're having conversations. I'm like, what are we going to do here, Joe? What are you going to drag my ass into this thing, and it's a freaking scam? So I don't think so. I mean, I trust you, and if you do something I don't trust, Joe, I'll leave, like real fast. And depending on how it happens, I don't know if you want to be around. So when I went home, this is a true story. When I went home and I told my mom what the management training opportunity was, she said, oh, that's really nice, but what's the name of the company? And I did not remember. Because it didn't matter to me. If he ever mentioned the name, I didn't hear it. So I said, Mom, I think it begins with an E. And she says, was it, something, and I don't even remember the choices she gave me. Then at the end she says, no. This is the way she said it. No. It wasn't Electrolux. And remember, I didn't know what an Electrolux was. So I said, yeah, that's the one. And she says, that's bullshit. You're not joining. You can't join. You don't go back for the second interview tonight. None of that sort of stuff. You're not doing that. So, short story, I stayed. I went. Joe didn't lie. I mean, there's a lot of challenges. Joe didn't lie. And I became an area vice president. So I'm the wrong guy to say, when he's not trying to hide, there's the right way to do it, which is the way Joe did it, and then there's the Amway way to do it, which is the wrong way to do it.
I'll tell you what, that would be like me saying my parents always told me not to gamble, and then I bought a lottery ticket and I won $1 million. Therefore, my parents were wrong. I mean, statistically, if you buy lotto tickets, you're going to lose. So it was not bad advice to tell someone.
It's not like that at all, because I did what Joe told me to do when I became an area vice president.
Okay.
Your analogies are flawed. You're trying to reach for an analogy that's flawed. We're talking about apples to apples. I did what Joe told me to do, and I became an area vice president. That's impossible to argue with. I did what Joe told me to do.
Some people ignore the advice of their parents, and they gamble and they win. That doesn't mean the parents' advice to not gamble is bad, because on average, if you gamble, you will lose. Sometimes you will win, but on average, you will lose. Some people have become wealthy playing the lottery.
All right, so let's move beyond that, because now we're playing word games. Marco's going to love this. Marco's going to sit there and jerk off with. We're playing word games. Marco's going to say we're backing down. Go ahead.
Let me make another analogy that has nothing to do with scams. Okay, if you had told me when I was in high school how hard I would have to work to get an electrical engineering degree, I may have said, that's too hard. If you had told me how hard I would work in the Navy doing the nuclear power business, I may not have gotten in the program. So even if there's no scam involved, if you're told everything up front, you might not do something that would turn out to be a very good opportunity. So just taking away the whole scam environment, it's not evil to withhold information that might be detrimental. You don't have to tell somebody everything about everything for them to make a decision. You need to give them enough information that's truthful and honest, and then see if they're up to it. And so I just see that whole argument of, you didn't provide all the information.
Friendly enemies are people that want the best for you. So let's move beyond that one, because that's the one we both agree on. I don't want to get stuck in the woods from the ones we agree on.
One final thing on that. I would argue that it's very, very rare if you go for a job interview when they downplay and they try and
Joe was exceptional. I'm not doubting that. Joe was one of a kind. Not doubting it. He did it the right way.
The example you gave, though, Let's compare. If you're interested in buying a McDonald's or a Subway franchise, when you're talking to the salesperson about buying this franchise, I guarantee you they never say people are going to try and talk you out of buying this McDonald's and this Subway franchise because they're negative losers, they're dream stealers, they're jealous of you, they don't want you to become a business owner, they want you to work a job, a just over broke for life. That doesn't happen in normal business. Those sort of lines about your family are negative losers and they're jealous of you when they're trying to steal your dream, that only happens in the MLM industry.
And we agree. We agree that MLM, when done bad, is done really bad. So we agree.
Hang on. We agree. Hang on. I think it's done. I don't think there's such a thing as an MLM company that's done right. So we agree but disagree. You say it's only done bad sometimes. I say it's done bad 100% of the time. But we all agree that Marco's the opening to his speech about the story about his friend is spot on, and it's really he spoke really well and explained it well. There's nothing in there that he said that was factually wrong.
Happens every day. I wouldn't call it brilliant, but we agree. Let's move on to the next one because we're going to run out of time.